Hey, what's going on, everyone? Happy Tuesday. Hope all of you guys had a happy Labor Day, enjoyed some time off from work and some time with your families. And of course, I hope you enjoyed week one of the college football season. It was the sight to behold. Lots of great matchups, lots of upsets within the top 25. Of course, one of those teams that did not get upset would be the Alabama Crimson Tide, taking care of business, beating Miami 44-13. And in to talk about it, break things down, and the man himself, Michael Casagrande, that was there in Atlanta for all the festivities. Welcome in. How are you? How are you enjoying week one of the college football season? Tell me about the atmosphere in Atlanta. Did it seem like it was normal?
Wow, there was a lot of questions. I have to try to remember all of them in order. Week one was fun. I enjoy college football. The atmosphere felt pretty normal, felt pretty much, the before times in that sense. There are a few empty seats upstairs, but it seemed, the press box at that stadium is glassed in, so you kind of lose some of that atmosphere that you got, in the past, maybe at the Georgia Dome when it was open air. But, if you would have closed your eyes and said, what year is it? You wouldn't have, it wasn't like last year where everything was pretty much time-stamped with what year it was. You could tell right away from looking at wherever you were, that it was not a normal year.
Yeah, and by all accounts, from obviously sitting at home, not at home, I guess I had a game on Saturday as well. So I was actually in the middle of the Missouri football game, but obviously looking back at the highlights and, just some of the videos that we posted, it did look like the fans were back in full effect and everyone enjoying the atmosphere. And of course, the Mercedes-Benz Dome was wide open for all to see. I know that was a little bit different. Did you feel there was a different sense with the retractable roof open? Because I know that was something people talked about leading into the game, that it might potentially be different. Was it that different to you?
Yeah, it was like a totally different sport. I don't know how they actually caught and threw the football out there with the roof open.
I know, right?
Yeah. No, we were watching it pregame when it opened. It was kind of interesting to watch. It's a unique dome, the way, the mechanisms of how it opens. And as soon as it did, there was just like a spotlight string right onto the Alabama sideline. And they were still in the locker room. We were just thinking about what Nick Saban's going to think when he walks out there. And it was almost like the magnifying glass on an ant, tile. It was just the only one spot in the whole stadium was just the exact 30 to 30 yard line at the Alabama sideline. But, once things started, I asked John Mechie about it yesterday, and he said, it didn't really impact much. It did feel different, if like a kind of a different setting, being daytime, having the roof open. Then usually at nighttime, they play nighttime. The SEC championship usually it's darker outside. It was last year at least. So they battled through the adversity of the sun and won the game.
Michael, you always bring some humor to these things. I like that, the magnifying glass on an ant.
You're welcome.
I can picture you doing that, standing up above the stadium just with the magnifying glass down on the ants running on the field. All right, so let's get into the game. Bryce Young gets his first start at Alabama. Bryce Young, talking to him, I covered the Alabama spring game, and he had talked about how much he had really learned, sitting behind Mac Jones, learning from Steve Sarkisian, really kind of having that opportunity to really take in as much as he could. But now here's his opportunity, his big opportunity. We know expectations are at an all-time high for this guy. The expectations coming into the season, you're getting paid over $1 million for NIL deals. You haven't even taken your first snap as the starting quarterback at Alabama. You're making all this money. You're in the headlines. You're creating waves. And then you got to go out here and perform against a Miami team that, obviously was going to bring some level of competition. It wasn't going to just be a rollover game, but of course, Alabama took care of business, as you can see by the score. So do you think he lived up to expectations based on what you saw in game one?
Yep.
So what about
I'm just
his
kidding with you.
performance?
He did. I can expand on that. After the 2-minute monologue and then the yes or no question, I had to go with that.
It's not a monologue. I'm trying to bring conversation to this, Michael. This is not all about the Michael Casagrande show.
Oh, clearly. No, I mean, Bryce Young was, he's the guy that people thought he was going to be. He's the guy that the number one recruit coming out of high school. He's he's what everyone thought he was going to be. I think he showed the skill set that people were expecting, the mobility, but not necessarily the scramble guy. He'll move in the pocket, not necessarily to run for the first down, but to keep his eyes downfield and throw for it. As I noted a few times in stories on AL.com, that he only tucked it and ran one time the whole game, where in the past other dual threat quarterbacks have been a little bit more apt to want to take off and, is it 1-2 reads and go. And he was keeping his eyes downfield. He looked calm. He looked cool. He looked relaxed. He didn't look like someone making his first start in a collegiate football game. So if there were concerns about Bryce Young, I really didn't hear any. But if someone out there was worried about him, I think he answered a lot of those questions Saturday.
If there is one critique that I could give you first, that would be take a little inch back from your computer so your head's not cut off.
No, he wants to see most of that.
Is there one thing before we talk about the rest of the offense that stood out to you that obviously you think he'll go back to the film room and really focus in on, and something that obviously Coach Saban addressed after the game about his play?
The sack fumble, that even Saban has multiple times mentioned that it wasn't his fault.
Wasn't his fault, yeah.
There were some reads. I'm sure there were some blocking schemes. You could see Miami's front, their defensive front they were stunting. They were doing all kinds of movements to mess with the protection scheme. So I'm sure there was something that they could find in there that to direct the blocking at some point. There wasn't, I guess there was maybe one pass he tried to fit into a tight window that was knocked away incomplete, but not like there was some glaring terrible throw that he shouldn't have made, a rookie mistake. There really wasn't one of those moments that was like a real head scratcher.
All right, and looking at the offensive side of the football, a lot of key pieces going off to the NFL. We know that Alabama's had to reload things. When you kind of think about the guys that sort of were waiting in the wind, ready to kind of step up and take on this, spotlight, so to speak, Brian Robinson, John Mechie, the different key pieces that we were concerned about potentially having to replace, who would you say on that side of football really stood out to you the most, that you're like, okay, this guy's going to have an outstanding year and this Alabama team hasn't missed a beat?
The Jamison Williams, the Ohio State transfer,
yeah.
Obviously the 94-yard touchdown pass showed, exactly what they were hoping to get in him. When I wrote about last week, his high school track speed that was kind of on par with Henry Ruggs in terms of some of his better times and in sprint races as a high schooler, which obviously several years ago. But when he caught that 94-yard pass, he had already beaten the defender. It looked like they were in a zone defense, and he got in that soft spot, and then it was off to the races, and they couldn't track him down from behind. You could see that extra gear he hit to run for that, the final 50 yards or so for that touchdown. So I think that was definitely a big thing when you lose Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. Obviously, that's a lot to lose, but he was a big addition. There were some freshmen. JoJo Earl had a few catches. He's the guy that the four highly rated receivers that came in this class, he was kind of the one that's been getting the most talk recently. So, and he had a few catches. It was the first freshman to catch a pass. So him for sure. Cameron Latou, he was the linebacker turned tight end who his first two college catches were touchdowns. So it's kind of hard to be better than that in a receiving game to start out with. So there were plenty of things. There are plenty of positives, I guess. Me, I'm always trying to find something negative, and there really weren't that many things that I can really dump upon with the way the offense played on Saturday.
Yeah, I know, Michael. You're that glass half empty kind of guy. I know how you operate. Defensively, obviously, one game sampling. We've talked about this time and time and time again. The way this defense has not been necessarily the defense that Nick Saban has become so beloved for, and the some of the struggles they had in previous years, a lot of the injuries, and just not being able to shut out teams or limit the yardage and points that they have in previous seasons. Obviously, giving up 13 points in this game against Miami. Pretty good start for this defense how would you say they've improved from the 2020 version that we saw a season ago?
Yeah, I mean they were pretty solid in all phases. There were a few pass interference plays, and there were close calls that could have gone either way in the third quarter that helped lead to some of their points. But I mean, they were aggressive getting after the quarterback. Will Anderson is, the Will Anderson that everyone expected to see, and is living up to it again after a big, his big freshman year. They talked a lot more about how he's rounded out his game, and he's just an active guy in the backfield. Henry Kyoto, the Tennessee middle linebacker transfer. I noted during the game he almost looked like a cornerback. He's maybe 20, 25 pounds heavier than what a cornerback would be, but it's just so quick, so fast. Just the different model when you go back to 10 years ago when you had Dante Hightower out there, 260-pound middle linebacker, and Henry is maybe 225, 230. Just it's a different game, a different way of playing defense, and he clearly, was a factor. He got banged up late in the game, but he should be, it sounds like he's okay. He's doing interviews today with the local media. So if he was hurt, if he was a big thing, he wouldn't be out there talking. So if that's any indication for them. But yeah, I mean, there were some breakdowns later in the game when they put backups in, but nothing left that game. Chris Allen injury obviously is not what you want to see. Likely out for the year as outside linebacker. They're pretty deep at outside linebacker as well. So I'm curious to see which of those guys step up. I think they answered a lot of questions. Got some of it's hard to have ghosts, a chip on your shoulder coming off of a national championship. If there was one, it might have been with that defense.
Yeah, well said, Michael. And you mentioned Chris Allen. Nick Saban addressed that in his press conference yesterday. He said he broke his foot during the game, I guess required surgery. The likelihood of him coming back this season is not looking good, but certainly have updates there. But as you mentioned, the depth there at that position should certainly be beneficial for Alabama. And I guess we'll look forward to week 2. Bryant-Denny Stadium. I assume you'll be making the trip to Bryant-Denny Stadium. Get to be back in the confines of your home away from home. So Alabama, that'll be the home opener against Mercer, 3:00 Central Time on SEC Network. So looking forward to that one. And Michael, as always, thank you for all your insight. And next time I'll make sure I ask a few less questions to you so I don't muddy your brain through.
I'll just write them down. I'll keep notes. Maybe put them on the screen. Patrick can type them out one at a time and just list them off, and I can check down the list.
Well, you did magnificent job. Appreciate you, Michael, as always. And we'll check back in with you later this week.